Hey everyone, it's Lucid, and I have some kind of cool things to announce. First is that I'm hoping we get to do an interview with Illwinter. I think we're going to do that hopefully sometime this month. It will depend on their schedule. I'm very fortunate that they agreed to do that. I told them that I wanted to cover the history of Dominions on the channel. Like I want to go through there's a wonderful write-up about it in the Dominion 6 manual. And they basically do a little blurb every new game, and they keep the old blurbs in there. But I basically want to go through that history and kind of give some commentary on it before we do the interview. And that's because I don't want to waste a lot of the interview questions on which I think would be very interesting questions on, like, what were your inspirations? How was this created? All these things like that, on stuff that they've already talked about. And I want you guys to have it in your head when we do the interview so that it will be important context for that. So that's what we're going to do. This is going to be a video. I'm going to actually read a lot of this, and I'll read it off screen, and I'll pull up different things from different games they're talking about. So there'll be a little bit of visual stuff to go on with it. So that's what it's going to be. Oh, one other thing, a short ad. If you use PDF, like Adobe PDF, get that garbage off your computer. It's basically malware. This is like, it's so slow and horrible, and they're trying to sell you on like buying their subscription. I mean, it's absolute corporate horrible bloat. They should be, I don't know. Anyway, get this PDF gear. It's awesome. It's free. There's probably other good ones too, but so far this one's just been amazing. It's fast, does exactly what you want it to. You can sign documents and stuff. Anyway, that's the end of my actual, not an ad. Just using this. I wish somebody had told me about it. All right, here we go. Okay, a short history of Dominions. The world of Dominions took its first insecure steps in 1997. On the road to Santiago del Compostela, we had finished Conquest of Elysium, a simple yet addictive fantasy game with a great deal of net hackish unfairness and a multitude of monsters, a trademark of ours. We were working on a Space Empire game, but decided that Master of Orion 2, which is a great game, had much of what we liked in such a game, so we quit that project. This, by the way, I'll say, I think is one of the things that I think like great game developers think. It's less about exactly like, oh, how can we market this game or something like it, but it's more, does a game that we feel as developers should exist, does it exist? And so in this case, it's like Master of Orion 2 is a great game, does exist. We don't really have much to add. Let's do something else. So we quit that project. Then I went to France and Spain for the summer for a 1,000-mile walk. It took 72 days, and I had a lot of thinking to do. Several ideas came up, including a bug war with ants and wasps and other bugs armed with cybernetics and guns. How different this is than Dominions. Some ideas from earlier in the spring evolved, and rudiments of Pythium, Cetis, Man, and LaRue was a conglomerate of Alm and Marignon, came to life. When I returned from Santiago, we began working on Bug Wars, but soon got bored and decided to make a tactical fantasy game where you bought an army, pitted it against your opponent's army, Statistics, battle mechanics, and morale are from this era. The tactical engine was much based on board games where commanders give orders to squads. SPQR was one of them, so that's this game. The Age of Chivalry, which is this, and it has these little card punch-out things. I've never played any of these. And Warhammer Battle Fantasy, which of course is very popular. I don't think I have an image of that, but there's many editions. It's just tabletop Warhammer, I believe. Were inspirational sources. Morale loss and rout is a feature in all of these. At first, you monitored every single unit, but soon you only moved your commanders and told them what orders to give to what squads. So if we think on Dominions, you basically, like, you can't move individual units on the strategic map. The units move with commanders. Interesting. And then we have Warhammer Fantasy Battle gave us the idea that heroes are fun, but we didn't want heroes to be as important as they are in Warhammer Fantasy Battles. At that time, there were no magic items, spells, or monsters apart from the Hydra. After a while, fighting became boring and the output is boring, and then you quit. At this time, we were inspired by VGA Planets, which is a game that looks like this. And decided that we wanted to make a strategic play-by-email game with tactical battles. We started to think about how to place the tactical engine in a strategic game and still have a game that was playable by email. Control over battles was the solution. So that's really the entire origin of the Dominions style combat, is this idea that, like, in order to play by email, you want to have some influence over the battles, but you can't control them directly, like in real time. They have to do a lot of things based on what you told them. And so that, I think, is the core idea for the control over battles. And I'll also add to this, I think this core idea of Dominions is really interesting because I feel in many ways this is how, like, actual generals would command battles. They would, like, set up, they would see where the enemy lines were going to be. They would position their different regiments and squads and things with different orders. So a lot of all the work of the battle was prior to the battle starting. And then during the battle, mostly people just did what you had told them. Though, of course, there was a lot of reacting and stuff that would happen, like, oh no, my flank fell, what do I do? And they would have reserves they would send in and stuff like that. But a lot of the battle was done as like most of the stuff was done prior to the battle, that you would do your work as a general. From a purely tactical to a strategic game, or the move from a purely tactical to a strategic game made the world much more important. Some earlier ideas of an Ars Magica-like game of magical research and politics were remade. Random content. Let me pull up Ars Magica. Yeah. Let me see if I can get a better picture of it. Okay, I don't really have a better image to show you, but yeah, it's a tabletop game with a manual, basically. Random content in magical sites in the provinces would increase replayability. Mages of the Order of Hermes were replaced by competing gods. Magical and divine auras of Ars Magica gave us the idea of dual wars of armies and dominions. So in dominions, your dominion pressure, like your candles, emanate out and you help manage this with priests, but also obviously you're fighting mostly with armies, but also dominion. Mythological and historical paraphrases came naturally, as I have a great interest in the history of religions. Several nations have been thought up in the process of making the tactical engine, but they also evolved and changed over time. Pythium was split into Pythium and Arcocephale, into Marignan and Ulm. Magic and research were incorporated in the game. The 8 paths and several dozen spells were there from the beginning, but research was strange and boring. The idea of magic schools made research an important choice, not just a matter of how rich you were. Global enchantments were later added on, inspired by Ars Magica and Master of Magic. Since 1997, the game has undergone many changes, but some things are still as they were in the beginning. We still have the old papers from 1997 that tell us how many resources a plate curious costs and what mages should cost given a skill level, or at a given skill level. Even though we scribbled down some new stats and numbers were altered, the papers remained the same until work began on Dominions 3 in 2004, and we remade armor protection mechanics. Dominions, Priests, Prophets, and Pretenders was released in 2001, so it took about 4 years to develop. It got some Usenet attention, and we were glad to get some input. Bugs and imperfections were pointed out, and we tried to fix most of them. After a half year or so, we decided that we wanted to make a new game instead of just making small changes to Dominions. Let me pull up Dominions 1 here. I actually have it on my computer. I'll see if I can get it loaded. It failed to load. But here, we'll scan through this video, I think. So you can see the rudiments of the battle map here. Things are moving, arrows are shooting, things are going in rounds rather than real-time combat. So very cool. I think I might play this on the channel at some point. It'd be kind of fun to do. I have Dominions 1. Dominions 3 is when I started playing, but it'd be fun to play Dominions 1 and 2 as well. I think my very, very first video, was it Dominions 3? It might have been Dominions 4. But Yeah, I think it was probably Dominions 4. Anyhow, Dominions 3 or Dominions 1 for you. Okay, so they were saying they wanted to start a new game instead of making small changes to Dominions. So they had started on several different ideas, including a strange 3D version of Dominions. After a while, we returned to Dominions and decided to make it what it is now, Dominions 2. Our primary goal was to remake the user interface. Much was the same, but many ideas were difficult to incorporate into Dominions, Priests, Prophets, and Priests, Prophets, and Pretenders, yes. So many of the ideas that they had that were impossible to incorporate with the better UI are now possible to implement. We had as much time as we wished, no schedule, no expectations. During Christmas of 2001, I visited my parents and had some spare days. I accidentally made a board game map and system inspired by Dominions, but never managed to finish it. I still have a bunch of papers and a small wooden map and a little box filled with some 100 wood pieces that need painting. Johan Carlson, the programmer and co-designer, is much more of a finisher than I am. Later, we scanned the map and used it as our first Dominions 2 map. That is the Sundering, which I was trying to get an image of. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I can't really find it. I'm not sure what map this is, but this is a map, and it does look like it was scanned in. I see like texture marks from that make it look like it was done on canvas or something, though probably not wood to get these texture marks. Anyway, if I had Dominions 2, I would open it up. I did find a file that didn't have any actual image file in it, but it was called the Sundering English. Anyhow, let's get back to it. Dominions 2 was released, and we started working on the first patch. The first patch included new themes as well as a lot of small changes and bug fixes. The game and community grew, and we got positive feedback and inspiration from fans all over the world. Maps, mods, and other contributions made by fans kept the community as well as us active. New content was added in a small number of patches. We still had many ideas regarding the world, the game, and the future. At first, we were content with patching the game, but after a while, we decided that there were some things that could not be fixed unless we made major changes that were made in the game engine. We decided to start on a third version of Dominions. I had plenty of ideas regarding nations and themes. At first, the first was Oceania, an underwater nation similar to Pangaea. An early version of Oceania was included in one of the last patches of Dominions 2. Sarmatia was inspired by the Scythians, Amazons, and Androphags of Herodotus, and Bandarlog, a nation inspired by ancient India and Hindu myth, were two nations that I've been dreaming about. Soon the number of nations increased, and we decided to divide the nations chronologically and alter the theme structure. Themes were replaced by 3 ages with somewhat different characteristics. The concept of the awakening, an old idea, was relaunched. Then the work slowed down for a while. Work, social life, and other computer games ate up part of our time. We didn't have a deadline nor any clear direction, apart from adding fun stuff and making the game more user-friendly. After a very long period of random adding of content and bug fixes, we decided that it was time to start the beta. In 2006, the Dominions 3 beta forum was started, and almost 3,000 posts later, Dominions 3 The Awakening was finished. That's about it, I think. Okay, so that's gotten us through Dominions 3, which of course is this one. Probably could have the trailer for that playing while we start about Dominions 4. After completing Dominions 3, we were a bit tired. We were a bit tired of making Dominions, so starting with Dominions 4 then was out of the question. Also, Johan got a new full-time job at Sony Ericsson then and got his programming needs fulfilled there. So many Dominions 3 patches and a long break later, we got inspiration from making a new game again, but also wanted something different from our earlier projects. So we started with Taint and COE. Taint and COE was just a preliminary name, but we never figured out a better one. It was a real-time multiplayer online game, like an MMO, but not massive and with no 3D characters. So I think this would be like, basically you'd have smaller shards, essentially, how this would work. The game took a lot of inspiration from Star Sonata, a great little game, by the way. The concept was to buy a party of soldiers and donkeys, and then transport goods between villages, making money and by buying cheap and selling where demand was high. After a while, you'd be rich enough to start your own colony. and create mines if if the place is mineral rich, or maybe plant fields or sell oats. It was an Illwinter game, so we had magic and horrors too. When you had a colony, you could create a wizard's tower and have your mages perform magic rituals, craft items, enchant your surroundings. We had global rituals too, like meteor storms that made meteors crash down every minute or so. The meteor storms look very apocalyptic and were devastating for everyone but the horrors. Performing magic made the world more tainted, and enough taint resulted in horrors appearing. First, there came a few, then came some more, and then finally an apocalypse of horrors that destroyed settlements, player colonies, and eventually the entire world. It was, however, a bit too ambitious, and it felt impossible to finish, so it got laid aside. Instead, we decided... There's also an interesting thing that kind of just occurs to me reading this, which is that if you have like a small server, sort of, where there's like, let's say, 10 or 15 or maybe 20 people, and they're all playing together. And let's say magic gives you really big advantages. So as one player, you would really want to cast it. But the consequences of the magic are more global. Like they affect everybody. Like maybe this would be a horrible game design, by the way. But if they affect everybody, it creates like a real moral hazard. Like, do we screw over the whole world by doing magic? Or do we mostly not do it and then not screw everybody over? And then you potentially have people trying to gang up on the person actually doing magic, but then everybody's sort of doing a little bit of magic in secret. Kind of an interesting idea. And I do also like the idea of like starting up a shard with maybe like 20 people on it or something. And then eventually it's going to fall to horrors. Like that's the way it pretty much always ends. Okay, it was, however, a bit too ambitious, and it felt impossible to finish, so it got laid aside. Instead, we decided to make something much easier. That was to create a modern Conquest of Elysium, because we have always enjoyed that little game, and now we had some cool horrors from Taint and COE to put into Conquest of Elysium as well. After Conquest of Elysium 3 was finished, working on Dominions sounded like a fun idea again, so we started to plan Dominions 4. We had really a few major changes that we wanted to see. One was the 3D world from Taint and COE. Here you would get a line of sight for armies and movement speed that would be meters per day with exact distances between cities, and you could have changing line of sight and from magic rituals. Another idea was real-time battles, with everyone moving at once and spells having different cast times. The third idea was team play, with teams consisting of one god and his disciples. Then we made a list of all the little changes we also wanted, and that got very long. So long we thought it was enough with that list to make a new game, so we scrapped some of the major ideas that had the potential of making Dominions 4 a worse game than its predecessor. Thus we decided against 3D maps and real-time battles. We have experienced a few games that got worse from their update and didn't want that to be the case with Dominions 4, which, by the way, their real-time battles is not trivial, right? Because like there were a ton of problems when they did end up implementing real-time battles with Dominions 5, where things like you have to do leading of your targets when you're shooting projectiles if you don't do homing projectiles, and homing projectiles generally suck. So yeah, there were a ton of problems with that are not like problems, but they're like things that sort of have to be fixed for it to not turn the game into shit. Like if you make the game and you're like, okay, we've done real-time battles, but now archers are ruined. It's not a very great system. We kept the team play idea, though, because it fits well with the current Dominion systems, and really enjoyed the team play in War of the Rings board game, and wanted that same feeling in Dominions. I think I have War of the Rings here. That's this one. For those who haven't played it, there are fixed teams, Sauron and his ally Saruman on one side, and all the good ones on the other. When the development of Dominions 4, that does make you think, there probably would be some really fun scenarios you could do with Dominions, like all the pop kill nations on one side, and then all the people fighting the pop kill on the other. That would be kind of fun. When development of Dominions 4 started, the GUI system from COE 3 was imported. Then the network system, random map generation, and some 3D stuff from Taint and COE was imported too. Sprites were imported from both games, so we got some new horrors and new item pictures from Taint and COE. Where there were sprites for every mundane weapon and piece of armor in the game. Some monsters like gelatinous cubes from Conquest of Elysium were also imported. In an effort to get sprites sorted in a more logical way, as well as redrawing the ugly ones, Christopher decided to rearrange all the sprites in the game. It's probably like, I'm guessing the rearranging here is like sorting out the numbers. Look at the trailer for Dominions 4 playing. So for a long time, almost all the nations had what looked like random sprites for units, making it somewhat difficult to play. Our first test game took place right after we got the team play working. Many units still looked funny, and you had to tell Christopher, my scout looks like an elephant with a red cross on it, to get him to prioritize that. During development, a multitude of new ideas popped up. Some were small and easy to implement. Others had more impact on the game. The Thrones of Ascension was one such later development that we had just added once we came up with the idea. Some ideas were discarded and others lie around and might be added in future patches. Now, a bare month before release with almost 3,000 posts on our beta forum, the game is working well. Random sprites are quite rare. Bugs tend to be easy to fix. We hope you'll find Dominions entertaining, regardless of whether you're new to the series or a longtime player of our games. That was written by Johan and Christopher in 2013. Okay, so that was the creation of Dominions 4. I'll scan through here since I didn't really have this running most of the time. Man, Dominions 4 had some huge mega blesses that were pretty popular. It was a fun game. This is the last of the non-real-time games. Okay. On with Dominions 5. I think we'll try to have the trailer going from the start here. After finishing Dominions 4 and making quite a few patches, we too once again got a bit tired of working on Dominions. When thinking about what kind of game we wanted to work on, we decided it had to be something different, and we began work on our space game. It was going to be a game where you mined and transported minerals in order to build spaceships to defeat your enemies with. It was inspired by the good old VGA Planets game. So first I'll show you VGA Planets. So that's like this. I think we popped this up already. Be pretty cool. Here's a screenshot of the Illwinter game that they had been working on. I don't really think I showed you guys the Trade and Taint stuff either. So this is like the world building from Trade and Taint, which is kind of cool. Here's another Trade and Taint screenshot. Well, towns, and you can see people going between towns, and there's line of sight, and you can see towns off in the distance. Kind of cool. Okay. That game got random planets and some nice mineral surveys, but it never got far before we abandoned it in favor of a new version of Conquest of Elysium. We had some good ideas for COE, like an infernal plane that contained demon lords, and if you summoned them, they would actually be summoned from that plane. It would be possible just to kill them permanently by going down there and slaying them in their home plane. We also had ideas for random rituals, inaccurate monster descriptions, and new combat mechanics. After about 1.5 years and many additional planes, Conquest of Elysium 4 was released. After COE 4, we started to play and develop Trade and Taint again, just for the fun of it. It's a game we did not intend to finish, so we could play and experiment with it as much as we liked. Oh, here's another screenshot of the space game. So there would be real-time combat between, I guess they were calling it Ninth Millennium, but there'd be combat between ships where they're shooting lasers and missiles and things like that. So kind of cool. Let's pull back up Dominions 5. After a while, we wanted to make a game we could finish again, but we wanted it to be something different from COE and Dominions. We played many roguelike games back in the times, and recently we had played Tales of Maj'Eel 2, and we had many ideas about how to make a better roguelike. So we started to make our own roguelike game called Dungeons of Elysium. It had the same aggressive wildlife that can be found in Conquest of Elysium. It also took advantage of terrain drawing engine in Elysium that turned out to be really good at drawing dungeons too. Here's a screenshot of that. Dungeons of Elysium. You can see this is like a little dungeon here, and presumably this is the player character, some little farmer with a stick chasing around frogs and goblins. So it's kind of cool. Dungeons of Elysium had a similar class system to Trade and Taint, where you start with a random career, i.e. a footpad, and then the footpad can advance to a smuggler or burglar or grave robber, depending on what trainers you encounter. We created a few stories, a fun abstract travel system, a dungeon editor. Actually, the dungeon editor turned out to be very useful at creating a nice looking encounter maps for our own pen and paper role-playing games. After canceling Dungeons of Elysium, we later made the map editor a bit more user-friendly and released Illwinter's floor plan generator, a tool that can help pen and paper players. I think I'll pull that up here too. Wait 1 second. So that's, whoops, let me get the sound here. That's this. So you can make a bunch of these things and then export them as images and presumably print them and stuff too. So after a few months of DOE, we also started to work on our old Space 4X strategy game again. The planets and minerals were already in place, so this time we added production, space combat, ground combat. Combat was automatic like in Dominions, but more colorful with lasers and photon torpedoes in space. Production was a bit different than most of the other games. You had to create factories for specific spaceship models in order to produce them efficiently. So you were encouraged to not redesign your spaceship models too frequently, as you would have to build new factories for them as well. By now, many years had passed since we released Dominions. Oh, here's another screenshot of Dungeons of Elysium. Since we'd released Dominions 4, and we felt inspired to do Dominions 5. Real-time combat was going to be the major change for the new Dominions, but we had quite a few other ideas too. One idea that didn't make it in was the Council of Immortals, where you got to vote for divine laws and titles, and got influence from your claimed thrones. Another idea was for mounts to have separate stats, so you could either kill the mount or the rider. Christopher had some ideas for a ton of new nations as usual. Some of them made it into Dominions 5, and hopefully a few more will make it in future updates to the game. When the development of Dominions 5 started, we imported the GUI system from Conquest of Elysium 4 that gets rid of fuzzy-looking fonts, and the 3D engine was updated to use the one from Trade and Taint. After many years of incremental updates, the 3D world in Trade and Taint was both faster and better than the one in Dominions 4. It would also be stupid to not use that one instead. At first, we would use the particle effects on magic items that we had in Trade and Taint that made the items sparkle or burn with blue flame. But it didn't feel right in Dominions, so it was removed. When writing this, the 3D castles are still not finished, and some of the Rus units look like a few red letters, and many descriptions remain to be written. But the game plays well, and it feels realistic it will be finished in a month when it's supposed to be released. We hope you enjoy the game. Written by Johan and Christopher in October of 2017. Hard to believe we're all the way in 2026 now. All right. About the creation of Dominion 6. After finishing Dominions 5 and patching it quite extensively, we got some inspiration for Conquest of Elysium and started working on the 5th version of that series. COE 5 now had two new planes, the sky and the heavens, as well as much more interesting battlefields where the terrain features had stats and could start burning if hit by a fireball. The Cloud Lord was also added as a class and would start on the sky plane. While working on Conquest of Elysium, we collected and wrote down ideas for Dominions. About a year after Conquest of Elysium, we felt like implementing some of our ideas for Dominions, most notably how remaking the mounts worked. The mounts in Dominions 5 has always been a bit strange. Sometimes they use the rider as the target, and you have to kill the rider and you cannot hit the horse. So that would be the normal way that mounts work in Dominions. Like if you had a knight, you could normally... The horse was like modeled by giving you extra defense, but you really had to hit and kill the knight. And after that happened, then the rider was dead. Or like the unit was dead. Sometimes the mount felt important that you had to kill the mount first, and then maybe it transformed into a lone rider afterwards. So this would be like the Zayeden or something like that. And I can't remember how it was like for elephants. I think you basically had the elephant modeled and there were people on top, but I don't think they fell off the elephant after you were done, but they certainly could have. I can't remember if they actually did or not. It was not logical, and we wanted to change this so that both the rider and mounts had stats and both could be hit by attacks, and an area attack, like a fireball, should be able to hit both the rider and the mount at the same time. So we put COE 5 on the shelf for a while and started to work on Dominion 6 instead. At first, it was only the mount system that was being changed, but pretty soon, a new magic path was added as well, the Glamour path. With the addition of this path, we could separate the nations that are good at hurling lightning bolts from the ones that are illusions and thus like to diversify, and thus we could diversify nations a bit more. Work on Dominion 6, because like a lot of the glamour stuff was taken from air and from nature. Work on Dominion 6 continued for about a year before we decided we wanted to finish up Conquest of Elysium 5 instead. The work on COE included even more planes, a new map system, boats, and more classes. Eventually, we reached a stage where we felt it was ready enough, and it was finally released in 2021. Somewhere between, we also continued our game, Trade and Taint. We probably mostly played it, but some development got done as well. We fixed the invisible guard towers that were ambushing people traveling in forests. A limit of 5,000 or 50,000 units of a single type was also implemented, as the giant ants were going rampant and overwhelmed the game occasionally. After we had released Conquest of Elysium 5, as well as a few constraint patches, as well as a few content patches for it, we returned to Dominion 6. There was still a lot of work to be done on the reformed mount system, and several times we wondered if it was worth the amount of work it meant. But with the game finished, we were confident it was indeed worth it. There's also a lot of stuff related to the addition of the glamour magic that had to be addressed, including new sights, spells, and rebalancing. I'll say, I do think the mount system, it's cool. I feel like it's not... I feel like there's still problems with it. It's one of the things that, like, it's one of the changes that have been made to the game that I think I'm not totally sold on. Like, I don't know if it made the game fully better. I think it has the possibility to, but... Anyway... Okay, apart from the changes to the mechanics, there were several new nations and a few in the works that will be released in some of the first content patches. One of the new nations is Muspelheim, a nation we've intended to make for a very long time. With some new mechanics, our vision for that nation was made possible. So Muspelheim is part of like the creation myth of the world from Nordic mythology. And it's basically, you have the fiery kind of ashen center where fire giants rule, and surrounding them are all the cold giants of Muspelheim. And so anyway, that's what that nation is. Many of the improvements of COE 5 were related to gameplay and a better UI, and we probably learned a bit in the process. Dominion 6 has more changes to quality of life and UI than any previous iteration of the game, and we believe that the gaming experience in Dominion 6 is improved compared to earlier versions. I would heavily agree. I think it'd be very hard to go back from 6 to 5. Finally, we have added a server lobby for multiplayer games. There's also a lesson learned from COE 5 development. This is also a lesson learned from COE 5 development, how to set these up, presumably. Hopefully, it will help people find and start multiplayer games. And then they outline all the major changes made in Dominion 6. So I think that's it. There were some things I didn't mention that I probably should have. One was, I think, when talking about like the inspiration for the game, one of the things for the the magic system in Dominions is so interesting, and I think it really comes from Ars Magica. And Ars Magica has this basically noun-verb system where you have 15 kind of magical techniques, or you have 5 magical techniques in 10 forms. So basically you have Creo, I create, Intelligio, I perceive, Muto, I transform, Perdo, I destroy, and Regio, I control. And then those are against all of the forms, which are... Do we have them up here? I guess not. Maybe they're down here. Animal effects, lightning, liquids, corpus, like the human body, plants, all these things. So basically these are sort of like the paths, and these are sort of like the schools for Dominions. So cool to see how this system informed them. I think one of the questions I'm going to have for them when we do the interview is how I feel like a lot of modern game design has tended towards like board game design, but like it's very simple. Like if you think of the latest Civilization 7, it's like ultra simple. But I don't know. I mean, Illwinter's clearly using inspiration from these other board games, but like this isn't really simple. This actually is pretty complex. Like you have interactions between all these verbs and all these nouns. Like it's kind of nuts. And I've never actually played Ars Magica, but anyway, at any rate, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed hearing a brief history of Dominions. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the interview. All right, cheers.